There are people who love us in the worst possible way, and still, they love us. And there are secrets someone keeps for decades, convinced that silence is a form of protection, until that silence becomes the deepest wound of all. I'm going to tell you the story of Stella Marsh and Harper Cole, two women who fell in love during one summer in Noe Valley, San Francisco, and didn't see each other again for 20 years. When the aunt who raised her died of a sudden heart attack, Stella returned to the old Victorian house to settle the estate. And in the attic, in a place she was never allowed to enter, she found a wooden box sealed with packing tape. A single word written on the lid, in handwriting, she recognized instantly: Harper. Inside were 7 letters stained with dried blood. 7 letters someone wrote swearing they would never be sent. What Stella read in those letters changed everything she thought she knew. About Harper, about the night she vanished without a goodbye, and about the woman who raised her with so much love that she was capable of destroying her life to protect her. Because in that house, there was more than one secret, and more than one woman who loved in silence for an entire lifetime. This isn't just a love story between 2 women. It's a story of inherited fear, of truths sealed in boxes, and of what happens when someone, after 20 years, finally decides to open them. Stay with me until the end to hear this story. See you soon. There was dried blood on the letters. Not much. Just a few drops darkened by time, almost black, pressed into paper that had once been white. Stella held them with trembling hands, kneeling on the hardwood floor of the attic, surrounded by dust and cobwebs, and the first thing she thought wasn't about love. The first thing she thought was, someone wrote this while suffering. Someone was bleeding while writing my name. The attic smelled of confinement, of old dampness, of things that hadn't been touched in decades. Afternoon light barely crept through a cracked window, drawing a golden line across the floor that cut through the darkness like a wound. And there, among cardboard boxes eaten by time, moth-bitten clothes, and empty picture frames, Stella had found something that shouldn't have existed. Something someone had hidden with the intention that it would never be found. A wooden box sealed with yellowed packing tape, with a single word written on the lid in black marker, in handwriting that Stella recognized instantly and that cut off her breath like a blade. Harper. 20 years. 20 years without hearing that name spoken aloud. 20 years building an entire life on the silence of what once was, of what couldn't be, of what someone decided shouldn't be. And now, in the attic of a house that no longer belonged to anyone, Harper was coming back, but not the way Stella remembered her. She was coming back as a secret. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe now. YouTube prioritizes subscribers, and those who aren't subscribed miss out on future stories. Stella was 43. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders with a few silver strands she'd stopped dyeing a while back, not from neglect, but from a kind of elegant surrender to the passage of time. Her hands were those of a rare book restorer, fine, precise, with small scars from paper and adhesive on her fingertips. Hands that had spent decades repairing what others had broken. Hands that knew how to hold fragile things without destroying them. But now they trembled. She'd arrived in Noe Valley that morning, from Mendocino, where she lived alone in a small cottage near the coast, surrounded by books waiting to be restored, comfortable silences, and a solitude she called peace. Aunt Connie had died a week ago. A sudden heart attack, no warning, no goodbye. Connie, the woman who had raised her after her parents moved to Seattle when she was 10. Connie who taught her to read aloud, to make sourdough from scratch, to walk the steep streets of Noe Valley as if the world were a safe place. Connie, who never explained why Harper left. The estate attorney had told her the house was hers, that Connie had left her everything in a brief, almost telegraphic will. For Stella, the house and everything inside it. May she do with it what I could not. Stella didn't understand the phrase. Now, kneeling in front of that box, she was beginning to understand that it wasn't an inheritance. It was a confession. The Noe Valley house was a 2-story Victorian painted in faded sage green, with a small backyard where an old Meyer lemon tree perfumed everything in spring. The interior walls still had the original wainscoting and crown molding that Aunt Connie maintained like relics, and in every corner, there was some object Stella remembered from childhood. A wall clock that no longer worked, a wooden cross with a chipped frame, an oval mirror in the hallway that had always seemed too large for such a narrow space. The house smelled of years, of mothballs, of cooled stew, of absence. Stella had walked through the rooms one by one, like someone moving through a museum of her own life. The bedroom where she slept as a child, with the window overlooking the backyard. The kitchen with the cast-iron skillet Connie used for her famous Sunday pancakes every morning. The living room with the green velvet sofa where so many afternoons she'd read aloud while her aunt sewed. Everything was still there, intact, as if time had decided not to touch this house. But the attic was different. Connie never let her go up to the attic. As a child, Stella thought it was because of the unstable floorboards, the mice, the suffocating heat that accumulated under the shingled roof. But now, climbing the pull-down ladder that creaked under her weight, she understood that the reason wasn't the floor. It was the box. She opened it carefully, the way she handled the most damaged books that arrived at her workshop. First, she peeled away the packing tape, which crumbled between her fingers into sticky dust. Then she lifted the lid, and the past hit her with the force of something that had been compressed for 2 decades, waiting to be released. The first thing she saw were photographs. Dozens of them, printed on matte paper, some in black and white, others in faded color. Stella pulled them out one by one, with the delicacy of someone unearthing bones. And in each one, like a ghost refusing to disappear, there was Harper. Harper at 23. Harper with short hair, enormous eyes, a crooked smile that always seemed to guard a secret. Harper at the farmer's market on 24th Street, holding a sunflower. Harper on the roof deck of this very house, leaning against the railing with a camera hanging from her neck. Harper looking directly into the lens, looking directly at whoever took the photograph, looking directly at Stella across 20 years of silence. Stella let the photos fall onto her lap. She closed her eyes, and she remembered. The summer of 2005 was the hottest San Francisco had seen in years. The air was dense, almost solid, and the Victorian facades radiated a heat that made the horizon shimmer. Stella was 23 and had just returned from graduate school at UC Berkeley, where she'd studied art conservation. Connie welcomed her with homemade sourdough, sun tea, and the news that the daughter of their neighbor, Mrs. Porter, had come back from Portland where she'd been studying photography. "Her name's Harper," said Connie, while pouring tea into ceramic mugs. "Serious girl, always walking around with that camera like it's part of her body." Stella didn't pay attention. She had plans. Set up the conservation studio she wanted to open downtown, find material suppliers, convince Connie to let her use the back room of the house as a workspace. She didn't have time for neighbors with cameras. But Harper wasn't someone you could ignore. She met her one afternoon when the heat had emptied the streets. Stella was walking through Dolores Park looking for shade when she spotted her sitting on a bench, camera pointed at the playground where an old man was selling popsicles from a cart. Harper didn't look at her. She was completely absorbed in her frame, with an almost fierce concentration, as if the entire world narrowed to what she saw through the lens. "You've been sitting there since sunrise," Stella told her, not as a greeting, but as an observation, because she'd seen her from the house window that morning. Harper lowered the camera slowly and looked at her. She had amber eyes, almost golden in the direct light, and a way of looking that made the other person feel as though they were being photographed, even without a camera. "And you've been watching me from that window all morning," Harper replied, without smiling but without hostility, with a naturalness that caught Stella off guard. "Want me to take your picture so you'll have something better to look at?" Stella should have been offended, should have said something sharp and kept walking. But she laughed. An unexpected, almost involuntary laugh that broke through the heat like a sudden breeze. And Harper, who according to Connie was a serious girl, smiled for the first time. That was all. That simple. That inevitable. The following days turned into weeks without either of them noticing. Stella found excuses to pass through the park, to walk down the street where Mrs. Porter lived, to sit in the cafe on Church Street with a book she wasn't reading while waiting to see Harper pass by with her camera. And Harper found excuses to photograph the streets where she knew Stella would walk, to sit on the bench that faced the window of Connie's house, to show up at the farmer's market on 24th Street at exactly the hour when Stella went for fruit. They didn't talk about what was happening between them. Not at first. They talked about photography, about books, about how to restore paper without destroying the original ink, about how to capture the exact light of 4 in the afternoon over the bay, about the murals in the Mission District, about Connie's Chiappino that was better than any restaurant's, about the smell of fog rolling over the rooftops. They talked about everything except the obvious, about how their hands brushed when they walked, about how Harper looked at her when she thought Stella wasn't paying attention, about how Stella had stopped sleeping because she closed her eyes and only saw those amber eyes, about how the space between them shrank every day, every hour, every minute, like 2 planets caught in the same orbit, drawing inexorably closer. It was Harper who broke the silence. One night in July, on the roof deck of Connie's house, while the city sky was painted in that dirty orange of light pollution, and the sound of traffic arrived muffled like a distant murmur. They'd gone up with the excuse that Harper wanted to photograph the Sutro Tower against the night sky, but the camera rested on the deck, forgotten. "Stella," said Harper, and the way she said her name was different from all the times before. Slower, heavier, as if the name cost her something to say. "What?" Stella answered, and her voice came out weaker than she wanted. Harper didn't respond with words. She moved closer, took her hand, and Stella felt the world stop. Not in a poetic or exaggerated way. It actually stopped. The noise disappeared, the heat disappeared, the entire city disappeared. All that remained was the touch of those fingers intertwining with hers, firm, determined, barely trembling. "Tell me I'm not imagining this," Harper murmured, and her voice cracked on the last syllable. Stella said nothing. She looked at her, and in the darkness of that roof deck, with the scent of the lemon tree rising from the yard below, and the stars erased by the city lights, she did what she'd been wanting to do for weeks. She leaned forward and kissed her. It was a clumsy kiss, nervous, with lips that didn't know how to fit because neither of them had kissed another woman before, but it was real. So real it hurt. So real that when they pulled apart, Harper had tears in her eyes, not from sadness but from relief, like someone who'd been holding their breath for months and could finally breathe. "I thought I was going to have to leave Noe Valley without knowing," Harper whispered. "Without knowing what?" Stella asked. "If this was only mine." Stella squeezed her hand tight. "It's not only yours." That was the beginning. A beginning made of rooftops, of stolen glances, of hands finding each other under cafe tables, of carefully constructed lies to justify the hours they spent together. Because in the Noe Valley of 2005, in Aunt Connie's house, in the neighborhood where Mrs. Porter and the neighbors had known each other for generations, 2 women falling in love wasn't simply difficult. It was dangerous. Not dangerous like in the movies, with violence and persecution. Dangerous in the quiet way, the kind that destroys slowly. Rejection, whispered scandal, family shame, doors closing without a sound. Stella knew it. Harper knew it, and they both chose to ignore it. The summer advanced between stolen kisses and whispered promises. Harper photographed Stella obsessively, as if wanting to capture every version of her before she disappeared. Stella was restoring an 18th century book in the back room, with hands stained in adhesive, and her heart racing every time she heard footsteps in the hallway, afraid it was Connie, hoping it was Harper. "One day I'm going to have an exhibition," Harper told her one afternoon, lying on the studio floor while Stella worked. "And it'll be all about you. Except nobody will know it's you. I'll photograph your hands, your shadow, the way your nose wrinkles when you're concentrating. And everyone will see a beautiful woman without knowing she's the one I love." Stella stopped working, looked at her. "You love me?" Harper sat up slowly, as if the question had caught her off guard, even though she herself had provoked it. "Since the bench in the park," she answered. "Before you even spoke to me. I saw you through the window that first morning and thought, there she is. What I came to Noe Valley to find." Stella felt her chest fill with something warm, expansive, rising through her throat like a contained sob. She set the brush on the table, knelt next to Harper on the floor, and hugged her with a force that surprised even herself. "I love you too," she said against her neck, "and it terrifies me." "Me too," Harper admitted. "But I'd rather have this with fear than everything else without you." But the fear wasn't abstract. It had shape. It had a name. Mrs. Porter began to suspect in August. Nothing explicit, nothing that could be pointed to with certainty. But mothers have a radar for what their children try to hide, and Linda Porter was no exception. She started asking questions. Why did Harper spend so much time at Connie's house? What was she photographing so much? Weren't there any boys at the university in Portland? Wasn't she thinking about her future, about settling down, about giving her grandchildren? Harper dodged the questions with the skill of someone who'd spent years practicing the art of evasion. But each question was a reminder that the real world was still out there, beyond the rooftops and studios, waiting with its implacable judgment. And Connie was watching too. Stella never knew exactly how much her aunt knew. Connie was a woman of few words, of long silences and looks that said more than any speech. She didn't ask. She didn't accuse. But one afternoon, while they were chopping vegetables in the kitchen, she said something Stella would never forget. Things that get hidden in this house end up in the attic, and what ends up in the attic stays there forever. Stella cut her finger with the knife, not from clumsiness, from fear. "I don't know what you're talking about, Auntie," she lied. Connie looked at her over the top of her reading glasses with an expression Stella couldn't decipher, a mix of compassion and warning. "Don't insult me, girl. I'm old, not blind." And she said nothing more. She stood up, washed her hands, put the skillet on the stove, and started making dinner as if the conversation hadn't happened. But Stella saw her press her lips together, saw her blink rapidly, as if containing something she didn't want to let out, and she knew, with the cold certainty of someone who recognizes the prelude to a storm, that things were about to change. September arrived with the first rains. The smell of wet pavement invaded the streets of Noe Valley, and puddles reflected the Victorian houses like broken mirrors. Stella and Harper had stopped talking about the future as something distant. Now they talked about concrete plans, leaving, together, anywhere. "Los Angeles," Harper proposed. "I have a friend from school who lives there. We could stay with her while we find something." "And after?" Stella asked. "After doesn't matter. What matters is leaving." Stella wanted to say yes. Every part of her wanted to say yes, But something held her back. Something she couldn't fully explain. The image of Connie alone in that big house, chopping vegetables in the kitchen, with no one to read aloud to her in the afternoons. Connie, who had given everything for her. Connie, who had raised her without asking for anything in return. "I need time," Stella said. "We don't have time," Harper replied, and there was urgency in her voice, something close to panic. "My mother is setting me up with some guy from Sacramento, a friend's son. She says it's time I got serious about life. If we don't leave now..." "Now? This week? This week? Tomorrow? The day after? It doesn't matter when, Stella. What matters is that it's soon." Stella looked at her. Harper had bright eyes, a clenched jaw, hands balled into fists on her knees. She looked like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. "Let me talk to my aunt," Stella said. "Let me do this right." Harper nodded, but something in her expression hardened. Something closed behind those amber eyes, like a door half shutting without fully closing. "1 week," said Harper. "I'll wait 1 week." The week passed. Stella didn't talk to Connie. Not because she didn't want to, but because every time she opened her mouth to do it, fear closed her throat like an invisible hand. How do you tell the woman who raised you that you're in love with another woman? How do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? How do you ask permission to leave when Connie had never denied her anything? But this was the kind of thing you don't ask for. You just take? On the 7th day, Stella went to find Harper. Mrs. Porter's house was closed. Windows with curtains drawn, front door locked, mailbox empty. Stella knocked, waited, knocked again. No one answered. She went to ask at Mr. Stevens' corner store. "Mrs. Porter left last night," the old man told her, while stacking cans of beans on a shelf. "With the girl. Loaded everything into a U-Haul and drove off. Didn't even say goodbye." Stella felt the ground open beneath her feet. "Where to?" Mr. Stevens shrugged. Didn't say. But they looked like they were in a hurry. The girl was crying. Stella left the store without answering. She walked aimlessly through the streets of Noe Valley, under a fine rain that soaked her hair and clothes, and felt nothing, absolutely nothing, as if someone had switched off every nerve ending in her body at once. She reached Dolores Park and sat on the bench where she'd first seen Harper. The bench was wet. She didn't care. She stayed there until it got dark. Until the rain turned to drizzle and the drizzle to fog. Until the streetlights clicked on, casting yellowish halos over the wet sidewalks. Until Connie came out to find her with an umbrella and a sweater and walked her home without saying a single word, the way you lead a lost child who doesn't know how to get back. That night, lying in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling while the scent of the lemon tree drifted through the window along with the cold of the rain, Stella cried. Cried the way she hadn't cried since her parents left for Seattle. Cried until the crying became a dry, rasping animal sound that didn't seem to come from her throat, but from somewhere deeper, darker, more irreparable. And Connie, on the other side of the wall, heard her. And didn't come in. That was the first night of a silence that would last 20 years. Now, in the attic, with Harper's photos scattered across her lap like fragments of a broken mirror, Stella understood something that at 23 she wouldn't have been able to comprehend. Connie knew. She always knew. The box with Harper's name wasn't there by accident. Someone put it there. Someone sealed it. Someone decided the truth could wait, but not disappear. Stella picked up the letters. There were 7 in total, each in an envelope with no stamp, no return address, with only her name written on the front in Harper's unmistakable handwriting. For Stella. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clench her fists for a moment. Breathe deep. force herself to calm with the same discipline she used to restore fragile manuscripts. Then she took the first letter, the one with the oldest date. October 2005. 1 month after the disappearance. And she began to read. For Stella, I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight in 3 weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I see you sitting on that bench in the rain, waiting for me, and I can't breathe. I need you to know that I didn't leave because I wanted to. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I had no choice. And when you understand why, I hope you won't hate me. Though maybe I'd deserve it. My mother found out. I don't know how. I don't know exactly when. But she found out. I think it was the night we went up to the roof. I think she saw us from her bedroom window. Her window looks right over there, and that night the blinds were open. She never left the blinds open. She didn't yell at me. That would have been easier. What she did was worse. She sat down at the kitchen table, in silence, hands flat on the surface, and stared at me until I crumbled on my own. She stared at me with a disappointment so deep I felt it swallowing me. And then she said something that split me in two. If this gets out, Stella pays more than you. You leave. She stays. And this neighborhood doesn't forgive. She was right. You know that. In this neighborhood, scandal doesn't get forgotten. And your aunt wouldn't have survived the shame. Not because she's a bad person, but because she's lived here for 40 years, and her entire world is in these streets. They would have destroyed her, and you, along with her. My mother gave me a choice. Leave that night, no goodbye, no explanations, and she'd make sure nobody knew anything. Or stay, face whatever came, and accept that whatever happened to us would also happen to Connie. I couldn't, Stella. I couldn't do that to the woman who raised you. I couldn't make you choose between her and me. Because I know what your choice would have been, and I don't hold it against you. But I couldn't have lived knowing I forced you to make it. So I left, and while we were loading boxes into the truck, while my mother locked the front door with the kind of urgency people have when they're running from something, I looked up at your window. It was dark. You were asleep, or that's what I wanted to believe. I preferred to think you were sleeping and not that you were lying awake waiting for me. I love you. I never stopped loving you. And this letter will never reach you, because I don't have the courage to send it. But I needed to write it. I needed it to exist somewhere, even if only on this paper, the truth of what happened. Yours always, Harper. Stella set the letter on the attic floor with the delicacy of someone placing something sacred. Tears ran down her cheeks without her making any effort to stop them. They weren't tears of sadness, not exactly. They were something more complex, more dense, the sour mixture of relief and rage you feel when you finally get an answer you've been seeking for years, and it turns out the answer is both worse and better than you imagined. Harper hadn't abandoned her. Harper had protected her. But Harper had taken away her chance to decide. The light in the attic had changed. The afternoon sun had shifted and now entered obliquely through the cracked window, tinting everything in an amber that reminded her, with a cruel pang, of Harper's eye color. Stella wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing dust from the boxes across her cheek, and picked up the second letter. It was dated December 2005. Stella, it's Christmas and we're in Sacramento, at my mother's cousin's house. The city is full of lights and people, and I feel emptier than ever. My mother thinks I'm over it, that the move was the cure. She looks at me with that satisfied smile people wear when they think they've solved a problem, and I smile back because it's easier than explaining that you can't cure something that isn't a disease. Today I photographed a Baroque church downtown. While developing the shots in the makeshift darkroom I set up in the bathroom, I saw something in the image that stopped me. In a corner of the frame, blurry, almost invisible, there was a woman from behind with dark hair pulled up in a bun. It wasn't you. I know that. But my heart doesn't know. My heart searches for you in every dark-haired woman, in every hand holding a brush, in every laugh that sounds anything like yours. I wonder if you think about me. I wonder if you hate me. I wonder if Connie told you anything. I wonder so many things that sometimes I think I'm going to lose my mind from all the wondering. I found work at a photography studio. I shoot family portraits, sweet 16s, weddings. I photograph other people's love all day long and then come home and sit in the darkness remembering ours. I'm not sending this letter. Just like I didn't send the last one. Just like I won't send the next. But I write. Because writing to you is the only way I have to keep talking to you. Harper. If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. The third letter was from March 2006. Shorter, more desperate. I've moved back to San Francisco. Not to Noe Valley, don't worry. I'm in the Mission, in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. I got a job at an independent art gallery. I'm 40 minutes from you on the bus, and it feels like you're on another continent. Yesterday, I walked to Golden Gate Park and sat on a bench. I thought about our bench in Dolores Park. I wondered if you still sit there. I wondered if you finished restoring that 18th century book you had in the studio. I wondered if your aunt still makes those pancakes that smelled like butter in heaven. I wondered if you got married to a man. Someone your aunt would approve of. The thought made me nauseous, but it also gave me something resembling peace. Because if you're happy, even without me, then maybe what I did wasn't in vain. I need to believe it wasn't in vain. Harper. Stella set the third letter next to the others. She realized she'd been clenching her teeth so hard her jaw ached. She consciously relaxed it, the way she did when a particularly difficult restoration caused her tension. Harper had moved back to San Francisco, had lived 40 minutes from her. All that time, while Stella built her life in solitude, while she moved to Mendocino and opened her studio and surrounded herself with old books as a substitute for the human warmth she'd lost, Harper had been right there, 40 minutes away, photographing other people's love, writing letters she never sent. Why didn't she come find her? The question burned in her throat like acid. Why didn't she take that 40-minute bus ride, knock on Connie's door, and tell the truth? Why did she keep protecting her from a decision that was hers to make? But even as she formed the question, Stella knew the answer. Because she hadn't gone looking for Harper either. Because for 20 years she hadn't done anything either. She'd sat in her pain like on that wet bench in Dolores Park, waiting for someone to come find her with an umbrella, and when nobody came, she decided that the pain was the answer. The fourth letter was from 2008, 3 years later, and it was different from the ones before. Stella, today I saw your aunt. She didn't see me, or pretended not to, which with Connie you never know. She was at the art supply store in Soma, buying pigments. Remember how you once told me the pigments at that store were the best in the city for restoration work? I don't forget anything you told me. Nothing. Connie was in the herb section of the market down the street, buying thyme. She looked older, smaller, more hunched, but she had the same expression as always. That mixture of toughness and tenderness that only certain women of a certain age know how to maintain without one canceling out the other. I wanted to approach her. I wanted to ask about you. I wanted to scream at her to explain why she kept silent, why she didn't tell you the truth, why she let you believe I abandoned you. But I didn't. Because I understood something seeing her there, among the market stalls, with her canvas shopping bag and her glasses fogged from the steam of the food vendors. Connie was also carrying her share. She was also trapped. She also paid a price for what happened that night. I don't know what she knew. I don't know what my mother told her. I don't know what she chose to keep quiet. But I saw how her hands trembled when she paid for the herbs, and I knew it wasn't from age. It was from guilt. Harper. Stella leaned against the attic wall. The old wood was cold despite the afternoon heat, and the coldness seeped through her blouse into her back like a physical reminder of where she was, in the place where secrets went to die, or to be resurrected. Connie knew. She didn't just suspect, didn't just intuit. She knew. She had seen Harper at the market and pretended not to see her, or had seen her and hadn't had the courage to face her. Either way, Connie's silence wasn't ignorance. It was a choice. Why? The question pulsed like a second heart inside Stella's chest. Why would her aunt, the woman who taught her to read, who cared for her when she had a fever, who sang her lullabies to sleep, why would that woman choose to keep the truth locked in a box and seal it with tape in an attic? The answer was in the remaining letters. Stella could feel it, but her hands were shaking too much to open them right now. She needed air. She needed to get out of the attic, go down the stairs, stand in the yard next to the lemon tree, and breathe something that wasn't dust and secrets. She placed the letters back in the box carefully, as if they were the pages of a priceless manuscript. She climbed down the pull-down ladder, which creaked under her weight, as though protesting the disturbance. She walked down the dark hallway, passing the oval mirror where she caught her reflection for an instant. A 43-year-old woman with red eyes, disheveled hair, a dusty blouse, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. The backyard received her with the scent of the lemon tree, intense and sweet, almost obscene in its beauty against so much pain. The San Francisco sky had turned a deep blue, that blue that only exists in the Bay Area when the fog lifts and reveals the real color above. Birds sang in the lemon tree, as if nothing had changed, as if the world were still the same as it had been that morning, before the box, before the letters, before knowing. Stella sat on the wrought iron bench Connie kept under the tree. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, she allowed herself to remember not just Harper, but herself. The Stella of 23, who used to sit on this very bench reading aloud while her aunt sewed. The Stella who ran through these steep streets in untied sneakers. The Stella who kissed a woman on a rooftop and believed the world was going to end, and discovered that no, the world didn't end, that what ended was something worse. The innocence of believing that love is enough. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from the attorney. Ms. Marsh, I forgot to mention that your aunt left a separate envelope, outside the will, with instructions to deliver it to you personally. Can you come by the office tomorrow? Stella stared at the message for a long moment. Then she looked up toward the attic window, dark and silent as a closed mouth. Connie hadn't only left the box. She'd left something more. Another piece of the puzzle. Another layer of truth. The afternoon breeze moved the leaves of the lemon tree. And for a second, just 1 second, Stella thought she caught the perfume Harper wore that summer. Lavender and tobacco. An absurd combination that shouldn't work, but on her was perfect. It was probably just the scent of the neighbor's garden mixing with smoke from someone's kitchen. Probably just memory playing cruel tricks. But Stella closed her eyes and let the memory wrap around her like an old blanket, because after 20 years of running from that scent, from that voice, from those amber eyes, she finally understood something that changed everything. Harper didn't leave. Harper was torn away. And someone in this house knew it. Someone in this house kept the evidence. Someone in this house wanted Stella to find it. Just not then. Not when she was young and the pain would have destroyed her. But now, at 43, when she had the strength to carry the truth without breaking. Or at least, that's what Connie hoped. Stella wasn't sure Connie was right. She stood up from the bench, went inside, walked to the kitchen, and put water on for tea. While she waited for it to boil, hands resting on the tile countertop and eyes lost in the blue flame of the stove, she did what every restorer knows to do before intervening on a damaged document. Assess the damage, measure the risks, decide if the piece can be saved or if the attempt at restoration would destroy it completely. There were 3 more letters in the box, a roll of photographic negatives, and now an envelope at the attorney's office. The damage was extensive, deep, structural, but not irreparable. Nothing is irreparable when you have the right hands and enough patience. Stella turned off the stove before the water boiled. She didn't want tea. She wanted answers. She went back up to the attic. The 5th letter had no date, and that, for some reason, hurt Stella more than any word written in the ones before. Dated letters have an anchor in time. They belong to a specific moment, to a particular version of whoever wrote them. But a dateless letter floats. It's a cry hurled into the void without knowing if it's day or night, summer or winter, the beginning or the end. Stella opened it sitting on the attic floor, her back against the wall and legs crossed, surrounded by the photographs she'd pulled from the box again. The afternoon light barely entered through the cracked window anymore. A coppery glow, the last gasp of the Noe Valley sun, barely illuminated the yellowed paper. Stella. I don't know what year it is. I mean, I do. But it doesn't matter. Because every year feels the same without you. I could be writing this letter in 2007, in 2010, in 2015, and it would say the same thing. Today I did something I promised myself I wouldn't do. I went to Noe Valley, walked the streets we used to walk, passed through Dolores Park, sat on a different bench because our bench had a new plaque that said, "Donated by the Noe Valley Merchants Association." Someone claimed our bench. It struck me as a metaphor too cruel to be accidental. Your aunt's house looked the same. The lemon tree has more branches. The paint is peeling. But the sage green shutters are still there, the ones Connie cleaned with a damp cloth every Saturday morning. I didn't dare knock, but I stayed on the corner with my camera and waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. To see you come out? To see a version of you at 30, at 35, walking down the sidewalk with a book under your arm and that way you tilt your head when you're thinking? I don't know. What I saw was your aunt. She came out to water the window boxes with a yellow plastic pitcher. She moved more slowly, more carefully, and while she watered, she looked up and down the street with that expression I knew well. The one of searching for something without wanting to admit you're searching. I wondered if she was looking for you. If you'd already left Noe Valley. I took a photograph, not of her, of the lemon tree. Because the lemon tree is the closest I can get to touching you. I know this sounds sick. I know I should be over it by now. My mother says I'm obsessed, that I need professional help, that what we had wasn't love but codependency. Maybe she's right. Maybe all of this was nothing more than a summer madness that carved itself too deep. But if that's all it was, why can't I look at a rooftop without thinking of your lips? Harper. Stella set the letter on her lap and sat perfectly still for a full minute. She wasn't thinking. She wasn't feeling. She simply existed in that space between impact and reaction. That eternal second when the brain processes something too large to fit inside a single thought. Harper had come back to Noe Valley, had photographed the lemon tree, had seen Connie watering the window boxes, and hadn't knocked on the door. How many times? The question swelled inside Stella like a rising tide. How many times had Harper walked these streets, stood on that corner, raised her camera toward this house, while Stella was hundreds of miles away in Mendocino, restoring books from other centuries to avoid thinking about the present? How many times had they almost crossed paths without knowing it? How many times had they been one street apart, one doorbell away, one word apart, and neither of them had the courage to close that distance? She picked up the 6th letter. The envelope was more wrinkled than the others, as if someone had opened and closed it several times before deciding not to send it. Stella. Today I turned 40. My mother baked a birthday cake and gave me a rosary blessed by Father Thomas at St. Anne's. She told me to pray for peace. I thanked her. I didn't tell her that peace isn't found in a rosary but at an address I know by heart and can't bring myself to visit. I live alone. I have a cat named Ink because he has a black spot over his left eye that looks like a drop of India ink. I work as a freelance photographer, mostly for cultural magazines and editorial projects. I'm doing well. I have enough money, a decent apartment in Hayes Valley, friends who know nothing about you, a life that from the outside looks complete. From the outside. Sometimes I wonder if you built a life like that too. A facade life. A life that works on every front except the one that matters. Or maybe not. Maybe you actually managed to get over us. Maybe you found someone. Maybe you're happy. And if so, I'm glad. Truly glad, even if thinking about it breaks me in half. I have something to confess, something I don't dare write but need to put somewhere before it drowns me. A few years ago, I started a photography project. I call it What Remains. They're photographs of places where something important once happened but that are now empty. The playground where a child learned to ride a bike, and now there's just litter. The corner where a couple kissed for the first time, and now there's a parking garage. The window from which a mother watched her children come home from school, and now it's boarded up. Every place I photograph is ours. Every photo in that series is a place where we were together. The bench, the rooftop, the studio, the corner of the farmer's market, where you bought me a mango popsicle and kissed me with sticky lips. The doorway of Mission Dolores, where we hid from the rain and you told me my name sounded like the sunrise. It's an entire exhibition about you, and nobody knows. Nobody looks at those photos and thinks of love. They think of nostalgia, of urbanism, of collective memory. Critics say my work speaks to the passage of time in cities. They don't know it speaks of you. Remember what I promised you in the studio? That I'd make an exhibition about you and nobody would know it was you. I kept that promise, Stella. In the saddest possible way, but I kept it. Harper. Stella released a sound that was neither crying nor laughter, but something in between. Something born from the exact center of her chest and emerging as a broken exhalation, almost animal. An entire exhibition. Years of work. Years of photographing ghosts in empty places, of documenting absence as if it were a form of presence. Harper had turned her pain into art, and the world had applauded without knowing it was applauding a love letter that never reached its recipient. If any part of this story feels like your life, the hype button helps make sure it doesn't stay silent. One letter remained. The 7th. The last. Stella took it with both hands. The envelope was different from the rest. Thicker, heavier, as though it contained something besides paper. She opened it carefully and found, alongside the letter, a photograph. The photograph showed a door. A teal-blue door, paint peeling, with a brass number that read 47. Stella recognized it instantly. It was the door of the studio she'd rented in Mendocino 6 years ago. Her studio. Her door. Photographed from the sidewalk across the street, with that precise composition, that almost obsessive attention to detail, that could only belong to Harper. Harper had been to Mendocino. Harper had found her studio. Harper had stood in front of her door, camera in hand, feet away, and hadn't gone in. Stella's hands were shaking so badly, the photograph quivered between her fingers like a leaf in the wind. She opened the letter. Stella, I found you. It wasn't hard. In the world of rare book restoration, names circulate. Yours was mentioned in a preservation journal out of Northern California. A small article, page 12, about a conservator who'd recovered a 17th century manuscript damaged by water. There was a photo of you in the studio. It wasn't clear, pixelated, but I recognized you. I'd recognize you blindfolded, in a dark room, 1,000 miles away. I traveled to Mendocino one weekend, told work I was going to photograph the coast. Took the bus at night, arrived at dawn, walked through the town streets until I found the address from the article. And there it was, your door, teal blue, paint peeling, with the number 47 in brass. I stood on the sidewalk across the street and waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Didn't know what I'd do if you came out. Didn't know what I'd say. I only knew I needed to see you. Needed to know you existed outside my memories. That I hadn't invented you. That the summer of 2005 was real and not a desperate hallucination. You came out at 9:15 in the morning. Coffee in your left hand, a crossbody bag on your right shoulder. Your hair was loose, longer than I remembered, and you wore a white blouse with stains that looked like ink or adhesive. You walked looking at the ground, as always, as if the pavement held secrets only you could decipher. And you were beautiful. More beautiful than at 23, because now your beauty had weight. It had history. It carried the marks of everything you'd lived without me. I took one photo. Just one. The one in this envelope. And then I left. Took the bus back and cried for 6 hours straight without stopping, not caring that the man in the next seat stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Because I have, Stella. I've lost my mind. I've been in love for 20 years with someone I don't dare speak to. I've spent 20 years photographing places where we were happy. 20 years writing letters I never send. 20 years living halfway, breathing halfway, existing halfway. Because the other half of me stayed on that rooftop the night I kissed you. I'm not going to come find you. I don't have that right. I'm the one who let you go. I made that decision, even if it was for the reasons I already explained, even if it was to protect you, even if it was the hardest thing I ever did. I was the one who left, and the one who leaves doesn't have the right to come back. But I need you to know, even though you'll never read this, that there hasn't been a single day in 20 years when I didn't think of you. Not one. If someday you find these letters, if someday Connie decides it's time, if someday you open this box and read these words, I want you to know one thing. It wasn't your fault. None of what happened was your fault. You waited. You were willing to stay. I was the one who didn't have the courage to let you choose. And that, Stella, is what I regret most in my life. Not leaving you. Taking away your chance to decide. I love you. Always. In every photograph. In every empty place. In every letter you'll never read. Harper. The attic was almost completely dark. The last daylight had retreated like a tide, leaving only shadows and the distant glow of street lamps filtering through the cracked window. Stella hadn't realized how long she'd been up there. It could have been hours, could have been minutes. Time had stopped functioning linearly from the moment she opened the box. She held the last letter against her chest, the photograph of her teal blue door on top, and breathed deliberately, counting her inhalations the way a therapist in Mendocino had taught her, a therapist she'd seen for a year and then stopped seeing because she couldn't explain what she was running from without explaining who she was running from. Harper had seen her. Harper had watched her walk out of her studio with coffee in hand and adhesive stains on her blouse, and hadn't said a word. Hadn't called out from across the street, hadn't crossed over, hadn't knocked on the teal-blue door with the number 47 and said, "I'm here. I was always here. Forgive me." Out of cowardice? Out of respect? Out of that absurd and devastating conviction that the one who leaves doesn't have the right to return? Stella rose from the attic floor with muscles stiffened by position and accumulated tension. Her knees ached, her back ached, her eyes ached from so much crying. But the physical pain was almost a relief compared to what she felt inside, a mixture of fury and tenderness, of gratitude and resentment, twisting within her like two snakes fighting in the same space. She gathered the letters, the photographs, the image of her teal-blue door, and returned them to the box with hands that no longer trembled. The restorer had taken over. The part of her that knew how to organize fragments, assess damage, plan repairs activated like a survival mechanism. But something remained in the box. Something she hadn't examined. At the bottom, wrapped in a burgundy silk handkerchief that smelled faintly of lavender, there was a roll of photographic negatives. The roll was inside a black plastic canister, the kind professional photographers use to protect undeveloped film. And stuck to the canister, a post-it note in Harper's handwriting that said simply, "For later." For later. After what? After reading the letters? After understanding? After forgiving? Stella tucked the roll into her pants pocket and climbed down from the attic for the last time that night. The house was completely dark, and the silence had that dense quality old houses acquire when no one inhabits them. Not the absence of sound, but the active presence of something listening. She turned on the kitchen light. The fluorescent bulb flickered twice before stabilizing, flooding the tile countertop with white, merciless light that left no shadows to hide in. Stella placed the box on the table, poured herself a glass of water from the Brita pitcher, and sat down. She was 43, lived alone, restored rare books, hadn't had a meaningful relationship in 2 decades. Not because she couldn't, not because she hadn't had opportunities, but because every person who got close was measured, unconsciously, against an impossible standard. Amber eyes, a crooked smile, a voice that said her name like a spell. And now she knew why. Because Harper had never fully left. Because Harper had been there, 40 minutes away by bus, 6 hours away by car, 1 letter away, loving her in silence with the same desperate stubbornness with which Stella had missed her. They were 2 women standing on opposite sides of a locked door, each convinced the other held the key. The next morning, Stella woke before dawn. She hadn't slept more than broken fragments interrupted by confused dreams, where the streets of Noe Valley merged with those of Mendocino, where Harper appeared and disappeared among market crowds, where Connie watched her from a window without saying anything. She showered in cold water because the house's water heater hadn't worked in years. She dressed in the clothes she'd brought in her suitcase. Dark jeans, a gray blouse, the leather boots she wore to walk through the coastal streets of Mendocino. She looked at herself in the oval mirror in the hallway and saw something she didn't expect. Determination. Not the heroic determination of movies, but the more common and perhaps braver kind. The determination of someone who has decided to stop avoiding. She left the house at 8 in the morning. The streets of Noe Valley were just waking with that particular slowness of San Francisco's old neighborhoods, where time moves more slowly than in the rest of the city, as if the century-old Victorians exerted a natural resistance to the modern pace. A woman was sweeping the sidewalk in front of a still-closed craft store. A stray cat slept in a doorway, chin resting on crossed paws. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from some window, mixing with the damp scent of gardens watered during the night. The attorney's office was on a narrow street near Dolores Park, in a converted Victorian that preserved its original facade of painted lady trim and a small courtyard with a fountain that no longer worked. The attorney, an older man with a gray mustache and a wrinkled suit who introduced himself as Mr. Callahan, received her in an office that smelled of old paper and drip coffee. "Ms. Marsh, I've been expecting you," he said, gesturing to a chair in front of the desk. "Forgive me for not mentioning this yesterday. Your aunt was very specific. This envelope was to be delivered separately, after you'd spent at least one night in the house." "After one night in the house?" Stella repeated. "Why?" Mr. Callahan adjusted his glasses on his nose with a gesture that seemed more nervous than practical. "Your aunt said, and I quote because I wrote it down, she needs one night to find what I hid. If she finds it, the envelope will make sense. If she doesn't find it, the envelope will guide her." Stella felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the office. "I found it," she said quietly. The attorney nodded as though this didn't surprise him, and opened a desk drawer from which he extracted a large manila envelope, sealed with red wax, with Connie's handwriting on the front. "For my Stella, when the time comes." "Your aunt sealed it with wax herself," Callahan added. "She came to the office a month before she died. She seemed at peace, I'd say, like someone who'd made a decision she'd been putting off for a long time." Stella took the envelope. It weighed more than expected. She pressed it against her lap and looked at the attorney. "Do you know what's inside?" "No, ma'am. Your aunt was clear that the contents were private. She only asked me to ask you one thing when you came to pick it up." "What thing?" Mr. Callahan looked at her with an expression that wavered between professional discomfort and human curiosity. "She asked me to ask you, do you forgive her?" The question landed on Stella like a stone dropped into a deep well. It resonated, bounced against her inner walls, and sank to a place where reason couldn't reach it. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I don't know yet." The attorney nodded, as if that were exactly the answer he expected. "Take your time, Ms. Marsh. If you need anything from the office, we're here." Stella left the office with the envelope under her arm and walked aimlessly for a while. She didn't want to open it on the street, didn't want to open it in a cafe, didn't want to open it in the house. She needed a place that was neutral, uncontaminated by memories or expectations. A place where she could simply be a woman reading a letter, without the weight of 20 years of context. She ended up in Dolores Park, sitting on a bench. Another bench. Her whole life seemed to unfold on benches. Beneath the shade of a massive palm tree, whose roots lifted the pavement around it, as if the tree were slowly reclaiming the space it had been denied. To her left, the city skyline gleamed in the morning sun with that persistent cheerfulness skylines have, indifferent to the human drama unfolding below. Children ran across the grass. A couple of tourists took a selfie. A street vendor sold hot dogs from a cart. The world kept functioning. Stella broke the wax seal with her thumb. Inside the envelope were two things: a letter written on lined paper in Connie's shaky handwriting, and an old photograph, black and white, showing two young women sitting in what appeared to be a backyard, very close together, hands intertwined, with an expression on their faces that Stella recognized instantly because she'd seen it in the mirror during the summer of 2005. The two women were in love. You could see it in the way their bodies leaned toward each other, in the intimacy of the intertwined fingers, in the smile they shared like a secret. And one of them, the one on the left, the one with hair pulled back in a tight bun and large dark eyes, was unmistakably Connie. A young Connie, no more than 20, with an austere and luminous beauty that the years had turned into dignity. Stella stared at the photograph for so long that the hot dog vendor passed in front of her 3 times. She couldn't tear her eyes from the intertwined hands, from Connie's expression, from the other woman, the one on the right, who gazed at her with a devotion so transparent it hurt just to look at it. Connie, her aunt, the woman who went to church every Sunday, the woman who never married, the woman who lived alone in that big house with its Victorian trim and lemon tree and wooden cross, the woman who raised her niece with fierce dedication and never explained why she had no children of her own, why there were no photos of boyfriends in the albums, why her bedroom had a single twin bed that was never replaced with something larger. Stella opened the letter. Her hands trembled again. The restorer had lost control. She was no longer assessing damage or planning repairs. She was falling. My Stella, if you're reading this, you found the box. And if you found the box, then you already know about Harper. What you don't know is my part. And it's time you knew, because I'm going to die without telling you if I don't write it now, and I can't carry this much silence inside me anymore. The woman in the photograph was named Rose. She lived in Noe Valley her whole life, just like me. We met in grade school, fell in love at 17, and loved each other in secret for 6 years. 6 years, Stella. 6 years of hiding in back rooms, of inventing excuses to see each other, of pretending in front of the whole world that we were just friends. In 1978, Rose's family sent her to Virginia to marry a second cousin. They didn't ask her. They didn't give her a choice. They took her on a Tuesday morning, and I watched her get into the car from my bedroom window, and I did nothing. I didn't run to stop her. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't do a single thing, because in 1978, in this neighborhood, a woman didn't do those things, didn't feel those things, and if she felt them, she buried them so deep that not even she could find them. Rose lived in Virginia for 30 years. She had 3 children. Her husband died, and she never came back to San Francisco. She died in 2008 without me ever seeing her again. Do you understand now, Stella? Do you understand why I did what I did? When I saw what was happening between you and Harper, I didn't feel disgust or scandal or shame. I felt terror. A deep, ancient terror that came from my very core. Because I recognized it. I recognized the looks, the touches, the excuses to be together, the light that switched on in your eyes every time she walked into the room. I recognized it because it was exactly what I lived through with Rose. And I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, how it was going to end. So I did the unforgivable. I went to talk to Linda, to Mrs. Porter, Harper's mother. I didn't tell her the whole truth. I didn't tell her that my niece was in love with her daughter. I told her something worse. I told her I'd heard rumors in the neighborhood, that people were starting to talk, that if she didn't do something, the scandal would destroy them all. I lied, Stella. There were no rumors. Nobody knew anything. Nobody suspected anything. But Linda was a woman from the old school. A woman for whom what the neighbors think weighed more than the truth, and my lie was enough for her to act. Linda talked to Harper that night, gave her the choice you already know about: leave or stay and face the consequences. Harper chose to leave to protect you. What Harper didn't know, what nobody knew until now, is that the consequences she fled from didn't exist. I invented them. Why? Because I was afraid. Because I saw in the two of you what happened to me with Rose, and I decided that a clean cut, a brief and final pain, was better than years of hiding, of lying, of living halfway the way I had. Because I thought that if Harper left, you'd suffer for a while and then move on. You'd find someone. You'd have a normal life. You'd be happy the way I never could be. But I was wrong. I was wrong in the most complete and devastating way a person can be wrong. Because you didn't move on. You went to Mendocino, locked yourself away among old books, and built exactly the same life I had. A lonely life, a tidy life, an ordered life that from the outside looks like peace, and from the inside is just the habit of absence. I turned you into me, Stella. That's what I did. I tried to save you from my fate and condemned you to repeat it. Harper's letters arrived by mail over the years. Although she wrote in them that she wouldn't send them, in the end she always did. She sent them to my address, not yours, because she didn't know you'd left Noe Valley. She sent them without a return address, in white envelopes, with instructions to give them to Stella when I saw fit. I never saw fit. I never had the courage. I read every single one, and each was another nail in the coffin of my conscience. When I saw Harper at the art supply store in Soma, yes, I saw her, and yes, I pretended not to. I wanted to die. Literally. Not in a dramatic way, but a practical one. I wanted to stop existing so I wouldn't have to keep carrying what I'd done. But I didn't die. I kept living, kept chopping vegetables, kept watering the window boxes, kept going to church on Sundays to ask forgiveness for a sin that isn't in any catechism. Now I'm old and I'm tired, and the guilt weighs more than my bones. And I'm going to do the only thing I can do, which is too little and too late. Leave you the truth. All of it. Without filters. Without excuses. The box with Harper's letters and photographs is in the attic. I sealed it. I hid it. I decided when it should be found. And along with this letter, I'm leaving you the photo of Rose and me, so you'll understand that I never judged you. I never judged you. What I felt was fear. The same fear that stole my life and that, by trying to protect you from it, stole yours too. I don't ask for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it, but I ask you for something that might be harder. I ask you to do what I never did. Find Harper. Tell her the truth. Give her the chance I took from both of you. Because 20 years is a long time, Stella. But it's not forever. Not yet. Your aunt who loved you wrong while trying to love you right, Connie. Stella folded the letter with surgical precision, slid it back into the envelope, and sat on the bench in Dolores Park, while the world kept spinning around her with that obscene indifference everyday life has when someone is in the middle of an internal collapse. The children kept running. The skyline kept gleaming. The hot dog vendor kept calling out, and Stella had just discovered that the woman who raised her, the woman she loved most in the world, the woman who taught her to read and make sourdough and walk through the streets as if they were safe, was the reason she'd lost the love of her life. Not out of malice, out of fear. A fear so deep, so rooted, so generational, that Connie genuinely believed destroying her niece's happiness was a form of protecting her, because that's how she herself had been protected. Because that's how the world she grew up in worked. Because love between two women, in the Noe Valley of 1978 and in the one of 2005, was something to be kept in sealed boxes in attics, in black and white photos hidden in manila envelopes, in entire lives lived halfway. Stella felt rage. A clean, transparent rage that wasn't directed at Connie because Connie was no longer there to receive it, nor at Linda because Linda had acted on the information she was given, nor at Harper because Harper did what she believed was right. The rage was against something larger, more diffuse, more impossible to fight. Against the silence. Against entire generations of accumulated silence, of buried truths, of lives sacrificed on the altar of what others might think. Against the idea that love could be a source of shame. She stood from the bench. Her whole body ached as though she'd been carrying weight for hours, and in a way she had. She walked back to Connie's house through the streets of Noe Valley, past the painted facades and the murals and the bougainvillea climbing walls like splashes of living paint. And every step was a step further from the woman she'd been that morning, and a step closer to the one she was deciding to become. In her pocket, the roll of undeveloped negatives weighed like a promise, or like a threat. She didn't know which yet. Stella knew of a photography lab in Hayes Valley that still developed analog negatives. She knew because a fellow conservator from Mendocino had mentioned it once, a man named Tom, who collected vintage cameras and insisted that analog processing had an honesty digital could never replicate. Stella had never paid attention to that conversation. Now she owed him a mental apology for ignoring it. The lab was called the Dark Room and sat on a tree-lined street in Hayes Valley, in the basement of a mid-century building that had survived the '89 earthquake with more dignity than many of its neighbors. The concrete facade had healed cracks that gave it the look of a war veteran, and the entrance to the basement was a metal door painted black with a hand-lettered sign that read, "If you're looking for Instagram, you've got the wrong address." Stella descended the steps, clutching the roll of negatives wrapped in the burgundy handkerchief, pressing it against her chest as if someone might snatch it away. The basement was cool, almost cold, with the constant humidity of below-ground spaces in San Francisco, and it smelled of photographic chemicals, fixer, developer, acetic acid, a blend Stella didn't know but that her memory instantly associated with Harper, with the summer of 2005, with the afternoons when Harper explained the developing process with the meticulous passion she brought to everything she did. Behind the counter was a woman in her 60s, with close-cropped white hair, round glasses, and hands stained with what looked like printing ink. She introduced herself as Lucy. "I need to develop a roll," said Stella, placing the plastic canister on the counter. "It's old. I don't know what year or what condition the film is in." Lucy took the canister, opened it carefully, partially extracted the roll, and examined it against the light with a loupe she pulled from her apron pocket, like a surgeon examining an X-ray. Ilford HP5 film, black and white. 36 exposures, she pronounced. Well preserved, all things considered. I'd estimate 15 to 20 years, maybe more. Can it be developed? We can try. There might be some contrast loss, some fogging, a frame or two that's unusable. But HP5 is a noble film. Holds up well over time if it was stored somewhere dry. How long would it take? Lucy studied her over her glasses with that quick assessment people make when they've spent decades reading urgency in their clients' faces. Normally I'd ask for 3 days, but you look like 3 days would feel like 3 years. I can have it by tomorrow afternoon if you leave a deposit. Stella paid the full amount up front. She left the lab empty-handed with a sensation of vertigo that had nothing to do with the steep basement steps. She'd handed over the last thing left in Harper's box. The undeveloped negatives, the images Harper had kept with the note, for later. What had she photographed? When? Why hadn't she developed the film herself? Harper was a professional photographer. She had access to dark rooms, to labs, to everything she needed. Why had she left that role undeveloped? Like an unanswered question, like a locked door. She spent the afternoon at Connie's house, cleaning. Not out of practical necessity, but emotional need, because cleaning was the closest thing she could find to imposing order on the chaos inside her. She swept the hardwood floors, dusted the furniture, scrubbed the kitchen tiles with soap and water the way Connie did on Saturdays. And while she cleaned, she thought about Connie and Rose in 1978, sitting in a backyard with hands intertwined, with the smile of people who know what they have is beautiful and fleeting. She thought about Connie watching Rose get into a car bound for Virginia and doing nothing. She thought about Connie living 40 years with that silence, turning an entire house into a monument to regret, filling it with crosses and prayer books, as if faith could compensate for what fear had cost her. She thought about Connie watching her niece, make the same mistake. No, not the same mistake. Live the same love. And deciding to intervene in the worst possible way. Could she forgive her? The attorney's question kept echoing. Could she forgive a woman who loved her so much she destroyed her? And there, while washing a ceramic plate with a sponge, Stella had a thought that stopped her cold. Connie hadn't destroyed her. Damaged her, yes. caused her 20 years of unnecessary solitude. Yes. But she hadn't destroyed her. Stella had her studio, her craft, her independence, her ability to stand before a book ravaged by time and bring it back to life. Connie had taken Harper from her, but she hadn't taken Stella from herself. And perhaps, in the twisted logic of a woman terrified by her own history, that was exactly the intention. That Stella would survive. That she wouldn't depend on anyone to be someone. That she'd build a life that could stand on its own, no matter who left. Stella placed the plate in the drying rack and dried her hands on a towel. No, she couldn't forgive Connie. Not yet. But she could understand her. And for now, understanding was enough. Night fell over Noe Valley with that treacherous speed of cities near the coast, where the sun drops behind the hills and darkness arrives like a curtain falling all at once. Stella ate what she found at the corner store. A sourdough roll and a cup of coffee she bought from a woman selling pour-overs from a pop-up stand on the sidewalk. She sat in the backyard, under the lemon tree, with the bread in one hand and the coffee in the other, listening to the sounds of the night. Dogs barking in the distance, music from a neighbor's radio, the motor of a bus on the avenue, the creak of the lemon tree when the evening wind moved its branches. She thought about Harper. Not the Harper of the letters, not the Harper of memory, but the Harper of now. The 43-year-old Harper who lived somewhere in this city, who had a cat named Ink, who photographed empty places and called it art. What would she be doing right now? Would she be sleeping? Would she be awake, staring at the ceiling of an apartment in Hayes Valley, thinking about a woman she let go 20 years ago? Would she know Connie had died? Would she know the box had been found? Would she know the letters had finally reached their recipient, 20 years late but intact, like a lost package that one day shows up at the door without explanation? Stella pulled out her phone, opened the browser, typed, "Harper photographer, San Francisco What Remains exhibition." The results appeared instantly. The first link was to a contemporary art gallery in the Mission that showed a past exhibition titled What Remains, Cartography of Absence by Harper Cole. There was a brief biography. Harper Cole, Portland, OR, 1982. Freelance photographer specializing in urban landscape and collective memory. Her work explores the relationship between space, absence, and time. Lives and works in San Francisco. There was a profile photo, small, pixelated, insufficient, but sufficient. It was her. Her hair shorter than in the summer of 2005, nearly cropped to the nape. Her face more angular, with expression lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But the eyes were the same. Amber, almost golden. The eyes that looked at her from a bench in Dolores Park 20 years ago and told her, without saying anything, that the world was about to change. Stella closed the browser, turned off the phone, finished her coffee which had gone cold. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The roll of negatives was still missing. She still needed to see what was in those 36 exposures Harper had stored undeveloped with a note that said, "For later." She needed to complete the damage inventory before deciding whether repair was possible. But Harper existed, was alive, was in this city. And for the first time in 20 years, Stella knew exactly where to look. The following morning was interminable. Stella tried to stay busy, organized the estate paperwork, called the attorney to confirm inheritance procedures, spoke with her assistant in Mendocino to make sure the ongoing restoration projects were on track. But each task was a transparent screen behind which the only real thing was the clock advancing toward afternoon, toward the moment when she could return to the lab and pick up the developed negatives. At 4 o'clock sharp, Stella stood before the dark room's black door. She descended the steps, trying not to look as desperate as she felt. Lucy was waiting behind the counter with an expression Stella couldn't interpret. Something between professional admiration and an emotion that didn't belong to someone who had simply developed an old role. "It's ready," said Lucy, and placed on the counter a black paper envelope from which the negative strips protruded. "I also made paper prints. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to see them in positive." "Why would I mind?" Lucy hesitated a second. Then she pulled from the envelope a series of 8x10 prints on photographic paper and placed them face down on the counter, like a deck of cards about to be flipped. "Because they're very personal," said Lucy. "And because whoever took them was very good. Extraordinary, I'd say." Stella reached out and flipped the first photograph. The image showed the door of Connie's house in Noe Valley. Not the full facade, just the door, the dark wood, the brass knocker shaped like a lion's head, the house number in painted ceramic. But what made the photograph extraordinary wasn't the door. It was what stood in front of it. A shadow. The shadow of someone standing before the door, projected onto the wood by the morning sun. A shadow that, by its outline, by the shape of the hair, by the tilt of the head, was unmistakably Stella. She flipped the second. The window of her childhood bedroom, seen from the street. The curtains were drawn, but in the lower corner of the glass there was a patch of light, as if someone inside had switched on a lamp. Harper had photographed the light Stella turned on at night. Third photo. The lemon tree in the backyard, seen from above, probably from the roof of a neighboring house. The lemons hung from the branches like small suns, and beneath the tree, blurry, tiny, a woman's figure sat reading a book. Fourth photo. The bench in Dolores Park, empty. At night. With the light of a street lamp creating a pool of gold on the path and a pair of dry leaves on the seat, as though someone had just stood up. Photo after photo, image after image, Stella discovered what the roll of negatives contained. Harper had never stopped watching her. Over years, in visits that must have been furtive, careful, almost ritualistic, Harper had returned to Noe Valley and photographed everything that touched Stella's life. The door, the window, the lemon tree, the bench, Mr. Stevens' corner store, the corner of the farmer's market, the doorway of Mission Dolores, and in some photos, not many, 5 or 6, Stella herself appeared. From far away, always from far away, as if Harper were afraid of getting too close. Stella walking down the street with a canvas tote. Stella standing in front of a flower stall at the market. Stella sitting in the backyard under the lemon tree, a book in her lap, unaware she was being watched, unaware that a few yards away a woman was looking at her through a lens with a broken heart and a steady camera. The last photo on the roll was different from all the others. It wasn't of Noe Valley. It wasn't of Stella. It was a self-portrait, Harper in front of a mirror, in what appeared to be a small bathroom with white subway tiles. The camera covered half her face, but the visible eye, the amber eye, the eye Stella had dreamed of for 20 years, looked directly at the lens with an expression that wasn't sadness or melancholy or any predictable emotion. It was defiance. As if Harper were saying, "Here I am, after everything, in spite of everything, still here." Stella gathered the photographs into a neat stack, slid them back into the black paper envelope, and looked at Lucy, who watched her from behind her round glasses with a compassionate discretion. "Are you all right?" Lucy asked. "No," Stella answered, "but I'm going to be." She left the lab with the envelope under her arm, climbed the steps to the street, and stopped on the sidewalk. Hayes Valley hummed with its usual mid-afternoon energy. Young people on bicycles, cafes with outdoor seating full of people, music spilling from a vinyl shop, the aroma of fresh bread from an artisan bakery on the corner, And somewhere in this neighborhood, maybe just a few blocks away, in an apartment with a cat named Ink and walls covered in photographs of places where something important once happened, was Harper. Stella pulled out her phone, opened the gallery's page where she'd found Harper's exhibition the night before, looked for the contact section. There was a generic gallery email and, further down, in small type, a link that said, "To contact artists directly, visit their individual profiles." She clicked. Harper's profile page had a professional email address, a link to her online portfolio, and a studio address. Harper Cole Photography, 1847 Hayes Street, Unit 7, Hayes Valley. Hayes Street, 6 blocks from where Stella was standing. 6 blocks. Not 40 minutes by bus. Not 6 hours by car. 6 blocks. About 500 yards of asphalt, cracked sidewalks, trees, people walking, dogs sleeping in doorways. 500 yards between Stella and the answer to 20 years of questions. If this moment made you hold your breath, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. She walked. She didn't run, didn't quicken her pace, didn't do anything dramatic. She simply walked, with the envelope of photographs under her arm and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples, her wrists, the tips of her fingers. She walked down Octavia Street to Hayes, turned left, and counted the numbers. 1821, 1829, 1835, 1841, 1847. The building was a 1940s construction, the kind that fills Hayes Valley. A brick facade with fire escapes, a wooden entry door with glass panels, and a courtyard glimpsed from the street through the plants spilling over a first-floor balcony railing. Unit 7. Stella stood in front of the entry door. She looked at the buzzers. 7 brass buttons, each with a paper label protected by plastic. The 7th read, H. Cole, Photography. She raised her hand. Her index finger hovered an inch from the buzzer, and there she stopped. What was she going to say? What words can summarize 20 years of absence, 7 unsent letters, an aunt who invented rumors to separate them, a roll of negatives documenting a 2-decade love obsession, and an old photograph of 2 women in a backyard proving that fear is inherited like the features of a face? What do you say when you reach the end of a 20-year silence and discover that on the other side, someone had been speaking the entire time? Only nobody passed along the messages. Stella lowered her hand, took 1 step back, 2, 3. She couldn't. Not like this. Not in yesterday's wrinkled clothes, with eyes still swollen from crying in the attic, with the smell of cleaning products on her hands and Connie's house dust in her hair. Not out of vanity, but because Harper deserved more than an impulsive apparition at her door. Harper deserved a decision. A conscious, considered, chosen decision. Not an emotional impulse or a reaction to discovering the letters, but a choice made with open eyes, with all the truth on the table, with the full understanding of what she was doing and why. Stella had spent 20 years without choosing. 20 years letting other people's decisions, Connie's, Linda's, Harper's own, dictate the course of her life. No more. If she was going to cross that threshold, she was going to do it as the woman she was now, not as the shadow of who she'd been. She turned around and walked back toward Noe Valley. But before she'd gone a block, she stopped, turned back, and looked at the balcony of Unit 7. There was a pot of red geraniums, and next to the pot, resting on the wrought iron railing, an old camera, a Nikon FM2. The same camera Harper wore around her neck in the summer of 2005. Stella recognized it the way you recognize your own scar, without needing to look twice. She started walking again. But this time, for the first time in 20 years, she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward something. She just needed one more day to be ready. One more day. After 20 years, One more day wasn't going to change anything. Or maybe it was going to change everything. She spent the night sitting in Connie's kitchen with Harper's letters spread on the table alongside her aunt's letter and the photo of Connie and Rose. She stared at them for hours, the way she studied damaged manuscripts before intervening, looking for patterns, connections, the hidden structure beneath the deteriorated surface. And she found it. 3 generations of women. 3 stories of silenced love. Rose and Connie in 1978. Harper and Stella in 2005. And now, in the present, the possibility of breaking the pattern. Of doing what neither Connie nor Rose could do. Face the fear. Open the door. Tell the truth. Not out of heroism. Not out of romanticism. But because after reading the letters, after seeing the photos, after discovering that Harper had spent 20 years documenting her absence with the same devotion with which Stella had spent 20 years restoring books to avoid thinking about her, the only thing more terrifying than finding her was not finding her. Stella gathered the letters, the photos, the image of Connie and Rose, and put everything back in the wooden box with Harper's name on the lid. She closed the box. She didn't seal it. Things that get sealed end up in attics. And she was done with attics. She went up to the room that had been hers as a child, lay down on the narrow bed that still had the floral comforter Connie bought for her 15th birthday, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would go find Harper. Tomorrow, for the first time in her life, she would choose. Stella woke before dawn, not from anxiety, not from insomnia, but from something different. A clarity she hadn't felt in years, as if someone had wiped clean a fogged window that hadn't been touched in decades, and suddenly the world looked sharp, defined, real. She lay for a few minutes in her childhood's narrow bed, watching how the darkness of the room slowly retreated as the first morning light filtered through the window overlooking the backyard. The lemon tree cast shadows on the wall that barely moved with the dawn breeze, and Stella observed them with the same attention she devoted to patterns of damage in an ancient manuscript, searching for what could be saved. She got up, showered, this time with warm water, because she'd figured out how to relight the pilot on Connie's old water heater the night before. She dressed deliberately, black jeans, a white linen blouse, the leather boots. She looked at herself in the oval mirror in the hallway and took 3 deep breaths. She wasn't preparing for a battle. She was preparing for something harder, vulnerability. Before leaving, she did something she hadn't planned. She went to the backyard, stood beneath the lemon tree, and spoke aloud to no one, or to Connie, or to Rose, or to all the women who'd loved in silence before her. "I'm going," she said, "and I'm not hiding." The lemon tree didn't answer. The morning breeze moved its branches, and a ripe lemon fell to the ground with a soft thud that sounded, in the silence of the yard, like a period at the end of a sentence. Stella picked up the lemon, put it in her jacket pocket, and left. The walk from Noe Valley to Hayes Valley took 40 minutes on foot. Stella chose to walk instead of taking the bus because she needed the time, the rhythm, the physical act of putting one foot in front of the other as a way to organize the chaos in her head. She walked down 24th Street past the farmer's market that was just setting up its stalls, past the murals on Balmy Alley that she and Harper used to admire on Sunday walks, past the diner on the corner where the smell of fresh coffee and bacon mixed with the morning fog. She crossed through the Mission, past Dolores Park, where a jogger traced circles on the dewy grass, and a man walked his dog along the path that ran beside their bench. The bench, the one with the new plaque, the one that had been theirs, and now belonged to the Noe Valley Merchants Association. She didn't stop. She kept walking. She climbed the hill on Guerrero Street, her calves burning from the gradient, her breath quickening, and came down the other side into Hayes Valley, where the streets were wider and the buildings newer, and the cafes already had their A-frame signs out on the sidewalk advertising pour-overs and avocado toast. At 9:15 in the morning, Stella stood in front of 1847 Hayes Street. The building looked different in morning light than it had the afternoon before. Warmer, less intimidating. The plants on the first-floor balcony had drops of dew on their leaves, and the red geraniums on the Unit 7 balcony were open, their petals tilted toward the sun like tiny satellite dishes tracking a signal. The Nikon FM2 was no longer on the railing. Stella looked at the buzzer, looked at the brass button labeled H. Cole, Photography. And this time, without hesitating, without letting her finger hover, without giving fear the time to speak, she pressed it. 1 second. 2. 3. 4. 5. A click. Static. Then a voice. Hello? The voice was deeper than Stella remembered. Rougher, as if it had been ground down by years of disuse, of talking to a cat instead of a person, of living in the echoes of her own apartment. But it was unmistakable. It was the voice that had said, "Tell me I'm not imagining this," on a rooftop 20 years ago. Stella opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The words she'd rehearsed during the 40-minute walk, the explanations, the context, the gentle introduction, evaporated like dew on hot pavement. "Hello?" the voice repeated, with a note of impatience that Stella also recognized. Harper had never been a patient person. "It's Stella," she said. Silence. Not the click of a hang-up. Not the static of a disconnection. Silence. The deep, breathing, living silence of someone who has just heard a sound they thought they'd never hear again. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. Then, so quietly Stella almost didn't catch it through the intercom's tinny speaker, Harper said, "3rd floor." The buzzer sounded. The door clicked open. Stella pushed it and entered the building's dim lobby, where the smell of old wood and laundry detergent mixed with something else, something she caught only as she started climbing the stairs. The faint chemical scent of photographic developer. The stairs were narrow, steep, with a wooden banister worn smooth by decades of hands. Stella climbed them slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of a desire to be fully present in each step, to feel the wood under her boots, to hear the creak of the 3rd step on each flight, to notice the way the light changed as she rose higher, dimmer on the 1st floor, brighter on the 2nd, where a window let in a slice of morning sun, and on the 3rd, a warm golden glow that spilled from an open door at the end of the hallway. Unit 7. The door was ajar, not wide open, not barely cracked, but ajar in that specific way that means, "I opened it for you, but you have to be the one to push it the rest of the way." Stella stopped in front of it. Through the gap, she could see a sliver of the apartment, a hardwood floor, a table covered in contact sheets and prints, a shelf full of photography books, and on the wall, in a simple black frame, a photograph she recognized with a jolt that went through her entire body, the lemon tree in Connie's backyard, its branches heavy with fruit, photographed from above, the same image that had been on the undeveloped roll. She pushed the door. The apartment was small but filled with light. 2 large windows faced Hayes Street, their glass clean, their curtains pulled back to let in every available photon. The walls were exposed brick on one side and white plaster on the other, and every vertical surface was covered in photographs, framed prints, pinned contact sheets, taped-up Polaroids, a gallery wall that mapped 2 decades of a career built on documenting absence. And in the center of the room, standing next to a wooden table with a mug of coffee in her hands, wearing a faded denim shirt and bare feet on the hardwood floor, was Harper. She was thinner than Stella remembered. The angles of her face were sharper, her collarbones visible above the open collar of the shirt, her wrists narrow where they emerged from the rolled-up sleeves. Her hair was short, cropped close to her head in a way that made her cheekbones look like architecture, and her eyes, those amber eyes, Those impossible, golden, devastating eyes were fixed on Stella with an expression that contained so many emotions. At once, it was like watching a storm and a sunrise happen simultaneously. Neither of them moved for what felt like minutes, but was probably seconds. Then Harper set the coffee mug on the table. Slowly, deliberately, the way you put down something breakable when you realize your hands are shaking too much to hold it. "You found the box," Harper said. Not a question. "I found the box," Stella confirmed. "And the letters. All 7. And the negatives. Developed them yesterday, at a lab in Hayes Valley called the Dark Room. A woman named Lucy said whoever took them was extraordinary." Something flickered across Harper's face. A ghost of a smile, or the effort of containing one. "Lucy's been developing my film for 12 years. She doesn't know about you. She does now. Or she suspects." Another silence. Harper's hands were at her sides, fingers opening and closing as if reaching for a camera that wasn't there. Stella recognized the gesture. It was Harper's equivalent of her own habit of pressing her thumbs against her fingertips when she was nervous, the phantom muscle memory of holding a brush. "How did you find me?" Harper asked. "Google, your gallery page, the What Remains exhibition." Harper let out a sound that was half laugh, half exhale. "I spent 20 years making sure you couldn't find me. All it took was a Google search. You didn't make sure I couldn't find you. You made sure you wouldn't come to me. That's different." The words landed in the room like stones in still water. Harper blinked. Once. Twice. And then her composure cracked. Not dramatically, not with sobs or tears, but with a slight tremor in her lower lip, a reddening of the rims of her eyes, a nearly imperceptible tightening of her jaw that Stella recognized because she'd seen it on the rooftop the night of the first kiss. The effort of holding back an emotion too large for the body containing it. "Does it matter?" Harper said, and her voice was barely steady. "I left. However you frame it, whatever the reasons, I left. You didn't leave. You were torn away." "That's what I told myself for 20 years. But it's not true, Stella. Nobody forced me into a truck. Nobody put a gun to my head. My mother gave me a choice and I made it. I chose to go. You chose to protect me. I chose to be a coward and call it protection." Stella took a step into the apartment. Just one. Enough to close the door behind her with a soft click that sounded in the quiet of the room like a lock turning. "I read Connie's letter," she said. Harper's expression changed. The defensive edge softened into something rawer, more uncertain. "What letter?" "She left me a letter, with the attorney, along with a photograph of her and a woman named Rose." Harper frowned. "I don't understand." "My aunt was in love with a woman. Her whole life. A woman named Rose who was sent away to Virginia in 1978. Connie never told anyone. She lived 60 years with that secret, and when she saw what was happening between us, she panicked. She went to your mother. She told Linda there were rumors in the neighborhood that people were talking. She lied." Harper stared at her. The color drained from her face slowly, like water retreating from a shore. "There were no rumors," Stella continued. "Nobody knew. Nobody suspected. Connie invented it. She went to your mother with a lie because she was terrified that what happened to her and Rose would happen to us. She thought that if she separated us quickly, we'd both move on. She thought she was saving us." Harper sat down. Not on a chair, there was no chair nearby, but on the floor, right where she was standing, as if her legs had simply decided they were done supporting her weight. She sat cross-legged on the hardwood, hands on her knees, staring at a point on the floor with the unfocused gaze of someone processing a revelation that rearranges the architecture of their entire life. My mother... Harper started, then stopped. Started again. My mother sat me at that table and told me the neighbors were talking, that it was a matter of days before the whole street knew. She said Connie's reputation would be ruined, that yours would be destroyed. She said... Harper's voice broke. She pressed a hand over her mouth for a moment, then removed it. She said she'd rather see me leave than watch me destroy someone else's family. It was based on a lie, Harper. The whole thing. The urgency, the danger, the need to leave that night. All of it came from something Connie invented. 20 years, Harper whispered. I spent 20 years believing I was protecting you from real consequences. And the consequences didn't exist. They didn't exist. Harper looked up, and for the first time since Stella had entered the apartment, her amber eyes were full of tears. Not the restrained tears of someone fighting to maintain composure, but the uncontrolled tears of someone whose dam has simply given way. I could have stayed, she said, and the words came out ragged, torn. I could have stayed and nothing would have happened. We could have had 20 years, Stella. 20 years. Stella crossed the remaining distance between them. She knelt on the floor in front of Harper, close enough to touch, but not touching, because she understood that this moment required proximity without invasion, presence without pressure. We could have, Stella said, but we didn't. And I didn't come here to talk about what we lost. Then why did you come? Stella reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the lemon. The small, bright, slightly lopsided fruit she'd picked from Connie's tree that morning. She placed it on the floor between them. Harper stared at it. Then she looked at Stella. And despite everything, despite the tears, the revelation, the 20 years of accumulated pain, she laughed. A real laugh, hoarse and surprised and broken at the edges, the kind of laugh that only comes when the absurdity of a gesture is so perfectly calibrated to the moment that no other response is possible. A lemon, Harper said, from the tree. Connie's lemon tree. It fell this morning, while I was standing in the yard trying to figure out what to say to you. It just fell. Like the tree was telling me to stop thinking and start moving. Harper picked up the lemon, turned it in her hands, brought it to her nose and inhaled, and Stella watched something shift behind her eyes. A door opening, or maybe a wall coming down, or maybe just the simple devastating recognition of a scent tied to the happiest summer of her life. It smells the same, Harper said quietly. Some things don't change. Most things do. Yes, but not this. They sat on the floor of Harper's apartment, a lemon between them, the morning light painting long rectangles across the hardwood, and looked at each other with the honest, unadorned gaze of two people who have run out of masks. I'm not 23 anymore, Stella said. I have gray hair and bad knees and a studio in Mendocino full of books that need me. I live alone, and I like it most of the time. I'm not looking for someone to complete me or fix me or make me whole. I'm already whole. Imperfectly. Incompletely. With cracks and patches and a few missing pages, but whole. Harper nodded slowly. I have a cat who hates everyone except me. I haven't had a real relationship in years. I photograph empty places for a living and call it art. My mother still thinks I can be cured. I see a therapist every 2 weeks who tells me I have abandonment issues, which feels like telling someone standing in the rain that they're wet. Stella bit her lip to keep from smiling. Your therapist sounds like mine. You see a therapist? Saw. For a year. In Mendocino. Stopped because I couldn't explain what I was running from without explaining who. Same. Exactly the same. A beat of silence. Then Harper reached out and picked up the lemon from the floor. She held it in one hand and extended the other toward Stella. Palm up, fingers open, an offering and a question in the same gesture. Stella looked at the hand. At the fingers, longer and thinner than she remembered, with calluses from camera grips and a small scar on the index finger she didn't recognize. A hand that had written 7 letters and photographed 100 empty places and held a cat named Ink, and never, in 20 years, held the one person it wanted to hold. She took it. Harper's fingers closed around hers, with a grip that was firm and trembling at the same time. And the sensation was so familiar and so alien that Stella felt her breath catch. Not from sadness, not from joy, but from the sheer vertigo of touching someone whose absence had become as familiar as her own skin. "I'm terrified," Harper said. "Me too. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to go from 20 years of silence to whatever this is. Neither do I. What if we can't? What if too much time has passed? What if we're not the same people anymore, and the love we had doesn't fit the people we've become?" Stella squeezed her hand. "Then we'll find out. But this time, we'll find out together. No one decides for us. No one leaves without an explanation. No one seals anything in a box." Harper looked at her for a long moment. Then she stood, pulling Stella up with her, and they stood face to face in the morning light of the apartment, still holding hands, close enough that Stella could count the amber flecks in Harper's irises, and see, for the first time, the fine lines around her eyes that 20 years had put there, lines of laughter and squinting through viewfinders and crying alone in dark apartments. "I need to show you something," Harper said. She led Stella by the hand to the back of the apartment, through a narrow hallway lined with more photographs, past a tiny kitchen where a black cat with an ink spot over his left eye sat on the counter watching them with regal indifference, and into a room that stopped Stella in her tracks. It was a studio, but not a photography studio. Or rather, not only a photography studio. One wall was covered, floor to ceiling, with photographs of Noe Valley. Not the artistic compositions from the What Remains series, not the ones critics praised and galleries exhibited. These were different. These were raw, personal, desperate. Photographs taken from corners, through car windows from across the street. The house, the lemon tree, the window, the bench, the doorway of Mission Dolores, the farmer's market, the roof of the corner store, and Stella, dozens of photographs of Stella, taken over years, from distances that shrank gradually, as if Harper had been slowly, unconsciously, closing the gap between them, one photograph at a time. "This is what I didn't put in the box," Harper said. "This is what I kept." Stella walked along the wall slowly, examining each photograph with the careful eye of a restorer, reading the visual chronology of Harper's obsession. No, not obsession. Devotion. A devotion recorded in silver halide and gelatin, in the grain of analog film and the precision of manual focus, in the thousands of small decisions a photographer makes every time she raises a camera and chooses what to preserve. "You never stopped," Stella said. "I couldn't. Even when you thought I'd moved on. Especially then, because if you'd moved on, the photographs were all I'd have left." Stella turned away from the wall and faced Harper. The morning sun from the studio window backlit her, turning her cropped hair into a halo of light, and her face into a study of shadows and angles that any photographer would kill to capture. "I never moved on," Stella said. "Not once. Not for a day. I moved to Mendocino and surrounded myself with old books, and told myself it was peace. But it wasn't peace. It was anesthesia." Harper's eyes glistened. "I know," she said. because I did the same thing with empty places. They stood in the studio surrounded by 20 years of photographs, and the silence between them wasn't the loaded, painful silence of secrets and avoidance. It was the other kind. The kind that happens when two people have said everything that needed to be said and are resting in the space between words, catching their breath before whatever comes next. "I have a proposal," said Stella, "and it's going to sound insane. After what we've been through, insanity is relative. Come to Noe Valley with me, today, right now. I want to show you the house. I want you to see the attic where I found the box. I want you to stand in the yard under the lemon tree, and I want to tell you everything, Connie's letter, Rose's story, all of it. And then I want us to sit in the kitchen, where Connie used to make pancakes, and figure out what happens next. Not what happened before. What happens next?" Harper looked at her, looked at the wall of photographs, looked at the cat, who had followed them into the studio, and was now sitting in a square of sunlight on the floor, licking his paw with elaborate disinterest. "Ink doesn't like being left alone," Harper said. "Bring him. He hates cars. We'll walk. It's 40 minutes. He hates walking too. Then carry him." Harper stared at her for 3 full seconds. Then she smiled. Not the careful, guarded smile of the woman who'd answered the intercom an hour ago. A real smile, wide and crooked and slightly disbelieving. The same smile Stella had seen for the first time on a bench in Dolores Park 20 years ago. "You're serious," Harper said. "I've never been more serious about anything. It's insane. Yes. We haven't seen each other in 20 years, and you want me to grab my cat and walk 40 minutes to a dead woman's house to sit in a kitchen and plan a future. Yes. What if the cat scratches you? I restore rare books for a living. My hands have survived worse." Harper laughed. That hoarse, surprised laugh that broke through walls. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. She disappeared into the bedroom and came back in 4 wearing sneakers, a canvas jacket, and carrying a disgruntled-looking black cat in a soft-sided carrier slung over her shoulder. The cat, Ink, glared at Stella through the mesh window, with an expression of such profound personal offense that Stella had to press her lips together to keep from laughing. "He'll warm up to you," Harper said, without much conviction. "We'll see." They left the apartment together, walked down the 3 flights of stairs, Harper adjusting the cat carrier on her shoulder, Stella holding the door, stepped out onto Hayes Street into a San Francisco morning so clear and bright it seemed deliberately composed, as if the city had decided to dress up for the occasion. They walked side by side, not holding hands. It was too soon for that, too raw, too new in its oldness. But close enough that their shoulders brushed with every other step. Close enough that Stella could smell Harper's shampoo, something cedar and clean. And Harper could hear the slight catch in Stella's breath every time their arms touched. They didn't talk for the first 10 minutes. They just walked, adjusting to each other's pace the way you adjust to a song you haven't heard in years, but whose rhythm your body still remembers. Harper walked slightly faster, with longer strides. Stella walked slightly slower, with a tendency to pause at crosswalks, even when the light was green. They found their middle tempo somewhere around Guerrero Street, and from there they moved in sync, 2 women and a disgruntled cat walking through the Mission on a Tuesday morning. "I need to tell you something," Harper said as they passed Dolores Park. "And I need you to not be angry. I reserve the right to my emotions. But go ahead. The self-portrait, the last photograph on the roll. I took it the same day I photographed your studio in Mendocino. I went back to my hotel room and looked at myself in the mirror and thought, this is what 20 years of silence looks like. And I took the photo because I wanted there to be proof. Proof of what? That I was still here. That I hadn't disappeared. That even though I'd spent 2 decades acting like a ghost, I was still a person. Still real. Still someone worth finding. Stella stopped walking. They were on the sidewalk in front of a Victorian painted in robin's egg blue, with a stained glass transom above the door and a cat sleeping on the porch railing, an orange tabby that ink hissed at through his carrier. You were always worth finding, Stella said. I just didn't know where to look. You didn't look. No, I didn't. And that's the thing I have to live with. You left to protect me and I let you. I didn't chase you. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand answers from Connie. I sat on a wet bench and cried, and then I went to Mendocino and buried myself in books and called it a life. You couldn't have known. I could have tried. I could have gone to your mother's house and demanded to know where you went. I could have searched for you the way you searched for me. But I didn't, because it was easier to be the one who was left than to be the one who fights. Harper shifted the cat carrier on her shoulder. Ink had gone quiet, either resigned to his fate or plotting an elaborate revenge. I think, Harper said slowly, that we both spent 20 years being cowards in different ways. You were a coward about looking. I was a coward about staying. And Connie was a coward about the truth. 3 cowards. 3 cowards and 1 very angry cat. Stella laughed. A real laugh. Unexpected. Rising from somewhere deep in her chest where it had been waiting, apparently, for exactly this kind of absurdity to set it free. They started walking again. Crossed into Noe Valley, where the streets narrowed and the houses pressed closer together and the trees arched overhead, creating tunnels of green that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the sidewalk. Stella's heartbeat quickened as they approached Connie's street, not from nervousness, but from something closer to anticipation, the feeling of bringing someone home to a place they've never seen, but have always, in some way, belonged to. They turned the corner, and there it was. The sage-green Victorian with the peeling paint and the lemon tree visible over the fence, its branches heavy with fruit, its leaves rustling in the late morning breeze. Harper stopped. She stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house the way she looked at every place she was about to photograph, with total attention, absorbing every detail, committing it to a memory that was both visual and emotional. It looks the same, she said. Everything looks the same. Nothing is the same. Stella opened the gate. They walked up the path between overgrown flower beds that Connie had once tended with religious dedication, past the front window boxes where the flowers had died weeks ago from lack of watering, to the front door with its brass knocker and painted ceramic house number. Stella unlocked it, pushed it open, and stepped aside to let Harper enter first. Harper crossed the threshold slowly, the cat carrier bumping against the doorframe as she adjusted her angle. She stood in the entryway and looked around with wide eyes that moved from the wall clock that no longer worked to the oval mirror to the wooden cross with the chipped frame, cataloging each object with the systematic attention of someone who had spent 20 years imagining this exact interior. The mirror, she said softly. You told me about the mirror. You said it was too big for the hallway. You remember that? I remember everything you told me. Everything. They walked through the house together. Stella showed her the kitchen with the cast iron skillet and the tile countertop and the old stove where Connie made pancakes. She showed her the living room with the green velvet sofa. She showed her the bedroom where she'd slept as a child, with the window overlooking the yard. And then, with a mixture of ceremony and dread, she showed her the attic. They climbed the pull-down ladder one at a time. Stella first, then Harper, who left Ink's carrier at the bottom after the cat made it very clear, through a series of guttural protests, that he was not going up those stairs. The attic was hot and dim, dust motes floating in the shafts of light from the cracked window, and in the center of the floor, where Stella had left it, was the wooden box with Harper's name on the lid. Harper knelt in front of it, touched the lid with her fingertips, tracing the letters of her own name in the same black marker she'd seen on dozens of her own contact sheets. "She kept everything," Harper said. "She kept everything. The letters I said I'd never send. She explained that, in her letter. You always sent them. Even though you wrote that you wouldn't, you always did." Harper closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek, following the line of the expression mark beside her mouth. "I mailed them from different post offices every time. No return address, just a note inside each one. For Stella, when you think it's time. I told myself I wasn't really sending them. I told myself putting them in a mailbox wasn't the same as delivering them. But I knew Connie would get them. I needed them to be somewhere other than my apartment. I needed them to be closer to you." They sat on the attic floor, side by side, their backs against the wall, the box between them. The same position Stella had been in 2 days ago when she'd read the letters for the first time. But now there was a body next to hers, warm and real and breathing, and the difference was so enormous, it made every other change irrelevant. "I'm going to tell you everything," Stella said, "from the beginning." And she did. She told Harper about finding the box, about reading the letters one by one, about the phone call from the attorney, about Connie's letter, about Rose. She told her about the photograph of 2 young women with intertwined hands, about a love story from 1978 that ended in a car bound for Virginia and a woman who watched from a window and did nothing. She told her about the lie Connie told Linda, about the invented rumors, about the consequences that never existed. She told her about developing the negatives at the darkroom, about Lucy's reaction, about seeing the photographs of herself taken from across streets and through car windows over the span of years. Harper listened in silence, her hands clasped in her lap, her amber eyes fixed on the cracked window where the afternoon light was beginning to shift. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She absorbed the story the way photographic paper absorbs light, completely, irreversibly, with the understanding that what was being imprinted would develop into something that changed the surface forever. When Stella finished, the attic was quiet. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic on the avenue and the faint, indignant meowing of ink from the foot of the ladder. "Your aunt," Harper finally said, "lived her whole life in this house, with a secret that ate her alive, and her dying act was to give you the truth, the whole truth, even the parts that made her a villain. Yes, that's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the cruelest. I think it's both. Can you forgive her?" The attorney's question, asked again, but this time by the only person whose answer mattered as much as her own. Stella thought about it. Truly thought about it. Not as a reflex or an obligation, but as a genuine inquiry into the geography of her own heart. "I can understand her," she said. "I can understand a woman so damaged by her own loss that she couldn't tell the difference between protecting someone and imprisoning them. I can understand that her fear was real, even if the danger wasn't. I can understand that she spent 40 years carrying guilt that would have broken most people, and that her final act was an attempt at repair. But can you forgive her? Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But I think forgiveness isn't something you decide. It's something that arrives, like a letter that takes 20 years to be delivered." Harper looked at her, and then she did something that Stella wasn't expecting. She laughed. Not a big laugh, not a happy one, but a laugh that held recognition and release. And the dark humor of 2 people who've been through something so absurd and devastating that the only reasonable response is to find the cosmic joke in it. "It seems to me," Harper said, that the two of us are the same kind of crazy. The kind that loves too much, the kind that doesn't know how to stop. They climbed down from the attic, released ink from his carrier, and the cat immediately claimed the green velvet sofa in the living room with the territorial authority of someone who has found his rightful place. Stella made coffee in Connie's old percolator, while Harper explored the house, touching walls and door frames and windowsills with the careful fingers of a photographer memorizing textures. They sat in the kitchen, at the table where Connie had chopped vegetables and kept secrets, with mugs of coffee that steamed between them like small signals of warmth. "What happens now?" Harper asked. "I don't know. I know what I want to happen, but I want to hear what you want first." Harper wrapped both hands around her mug, the way people do when they need something to hold on to. "I want to stop photographing empty places," she said. "I want to photograph places that are full. I want to wake up in the morning and not have to pretend I'm not thinking about you. I want to say your name out loud without it feeling like a wound. I want to sit in this kitchen and drink this terrible coffee and know that tomorrow I can do it again." Stella smiled. "The coffee isn't that bad. It's the worst coffee I've ever tasted, and I've lived in Hayes Valley for 12 years. Connie always made it too strong. Connie made a lot of things too strong, including decisions." They looked at each other across the kitchen table. Two women at 43, with gray in their hair, and lines on their faces and scars visible and invisible. And for the first time in 20 years, neither of them looked away. "I have to go back to Mendocino," Stella said. "I have projects waiting, clients, a studio that needs me. I know, but I'm going to come back every weekend. More if I can. And if you want, you could come to Mendocino sometimes. The coast is beautiful. The light is extraordinary. You'd photograph things that aren't empty." Harper set her mug on the table. "Are you asking me to date you? I'm asking you to give us a chance, a real one this time. With no lies, no sealed boxes, no decisions made by other people. Just us. The way it should have been from the beginning. We're not the same people we were at 23. No, we're better. We're harder and sadder and more cautious and infinitely more tired. But we're also more honest and more brave. Because at 23, I couldn't tell my aunt the truth. And at 23, you couldn't stay. But we're not 23 anymore. And the things that stopped us then don't exist now." Harper was quiet for a long time. The kitchen clock, a replacement for the broken one in the hallway, a plain plastic thing Connie must have bought at a drugstore, ticked with a steady rhythm that counted the seconds of a silence that wasn't empty, but full, dense with calculation, with weighing, with the careful evaluation of risks that two people who've been catastrophically hurt bring to any new venture. "I have conditions," Harper said. "Tell me." "First, no secrets. If something is wrong, we say it. If something hurts, we say it. If one of us needs space, we say it. No more silence. Silence almost killed us." "Agreed." "Second, we go slow. I know we have 20 years to make up for, but I don't want to rush. I want to learn who you are now, not who you were. I want to fall in love with the 43-year-old Stella, not the memory of the 23-year-old one. I might be less exciting at 43. You showed up at my door with a lemon. That's the most exciting thing that's happened to me in a decade." Stella laughed. "Third," Harper continued, and her voice softened. "I want to go back to the rooftop." "The rooftop?" "This house has a roof deck. We kissed there for the first time. I want to go back up there, not to recreate the past, but to start something new in the same place where something ended." Stella stood from the table, extended her hand. "Now, Harper took it. They climbed the stairs to the second floor, then up the narrow staircase to the roof access door that Stella had to force open with her shoulder because the wood had swollen with years of moisture and neglect. The door groaned and gave way, and they stepped out onto the small deck that overlooked the rooftops of Noe Valley. The view was almost exactly as Stella remembered it, and almost completely different. The same Victorians lined the streets, but many had been repainted in new colors. The Sutro Tower still rose in the distance like a skeletal monument, but new buildings had grown around it. The lemon tree was taller than she remembered, its highest branches nearly level with the deck railing, and the lemons caught the afternoon sun and glowed like ornaments. Harper stood at the railing. The breeze lifted the collar of her canvas jacket and ruffled her short hair, and in the golden light of the San Francisco afternoon, with the city spread before her and the scent of the lemon tree rising from below, she looked so much like the 23-year-old who'd stood in this exact spot that Stella felt time fold over itself like a page in a book. "It's smaller than I remembered," Harper said. "Everything is smaller when you go back." "Not everything." Harper turned to face her. The amber eyes were steady now, clear, with a certainty that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Some things get bigger," Harper said. "Some things you think were huge at 23 turn out to have been just the beginning, just the seed of something that grew for 20 years underground, in the dark, without water or sunlight, and somehow survived." Stella took a step closer. "Like a lemon tree," she said. "Like a lemon tree." The kiss was nothing like the first one. It wasn't clumsy or nervous or tentative. It was the kiss of two women who'd spent 20 years learning the exact shape of each other's absence and were now, with open eyes and full awareness, choosing to fill it. It was slow, deliberate, gentle in its firmness, and it tasted like strong coffee and morning air, and the faintest trace of salt from tears that neither of them was trying to hide anymore. When they pulled apart, Harper was smiling. Not the crooked, guarded smile from the photographs. A new smile. One Stella had never seen before. A smile that belonged not to the Harper of memory, but to the Harper of now. The one who existed in this specific moment, on this specific rooftop, in this specific light. "So," Harper said. "So," Stella repeated. "This is real. This is real. What do we do now?" Stella looked at the lemon tree, at the rooftops, at the Sutro Tower in the distance, at the city that had been both the site of their love and the stage of their separation. At all of it, all at once, with the eyes of a woman who restores damaged things for a living, and who has just found the most important restoration project of her life. "Now," she said, "we go down to the kitchen, make more of that terrible coffee, and start." "Start what?" "Everything." Harper took her hand. They stood on the roof deck for another moment, watching the shadows lengthen across Noe Valley as the afternoon began its slow descent into evening. Below them, in the house, ink had claimed Connie's green velvet sofa and fallen asleep in a patch of sun. The lemon tree swayed in the breeze. The wooden box with Harper's name sat on the kitchen table, open, its contents no longer hidden. And somewhere between the silence of the past and the noise of what was coming, between the letters that arrived 20 years late and the kiss that arrived right on time, something began that wasn't a happy ending. Because happy endings are for stories that are over. And this one was just beginning. A restoration. Not the kind Stella did with books, where the goal is to return the object to its original state. But the other kind. The Japanese kind. The kind that understands that what's broken, when repaired with care, with patience, and with noble materials, doesn't lose value. It gains it. Because every visible crack tells a story, And the best stories are the ones that survive. If you want the continuation of this story, write it in the comments because that's the only way I'll know you want it. And don't forget that YouTube prioritizes subscribers. So subscribe now so you don't miss the next story that will make you believe in love and in second chances. This is not an ending. It's just an open door. See you soon.